Welcome to The Focused View, the podcast for eye care professionals across Australia. Brought to you by Opticare. In each episode, we bring together leading eye care, optical and business professionals to share valuable insights, practical tips, and the latest trends shaping the optical business landscape. I'm your host, Michael Nasser, and together we'll explore innovative strategies for practice growth, patient care, and business success in the eye care industry. Whether you're starting your career, managing a practice, or just looking to stay ahead of the field, The Focused View is your source for inspiration and knowledge. Welcome back to another episode of our Elevate Your Practice series on The Focused View. As always for this series, we're joined by Joanne Scott-Dostine, our go-to expert for practical advice and industry insights. This time we're bringing you something special and a little bit different than usual, a recording from the OptiPro Roadshow event at the Rendezvous Hotel in Perth in front of a live audience. Today's topic is all about mastering stock management in your optical practice, which is key to running a smooth and profitable business. Joanne will guide us through the best strategies for managing your inventory, setting the right prices, and planning your merchandise. Plus, we'll hear a real-life success story shared at the event by one of our attendees, Allie, who saw great improvements after revamping her stock management approach. Whether you've been in practice for years or just getting started, this episode is packed with tips to help you take your practice to the next level. So let's get into it and learn how you can make stock management work for you. Joe, welcome to the show. Today is a little bit different. We are doing the interview or the podcast live here in Perth at the Rendezvous Hotel.
With people watching us, everyone, so yes, we're not used to that.
That's right, with people watching. So it's a little bit different, but thank you for your time. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's very relevant for a lot of practices with specific reference to stock management. The way that we're going to be doing this is us having a chat, and then we'll be opening it up to the audience to ask some questions on stock management or other topics that they may want to choose. We'll also have some participation from the audience as well with regards to speaking to a store owner and what their experience has been in this regard. So I guess without further ado, let's get going. We obviously know who you are, so we don't need the intro part of it all. But when we start talking about stock management and, with reference to an optical practice and what that looks like, what are some of the main things that a practice needs to keep in mind with regards to stock management?
So I've picked out 6 things that I think are really important for you to consider. The first one is actually knowing your store and what your store needs are. Second one is about setting a price strategy. And when I say price strategy, I mean knowing that you're going to have certain price points. So you might do a 39, 69, 99 in every 100. You might do 49 and 99 in every 100, but making sure you actually have a strategy. Working on your margins, so knowing what margin you want to achieve and being able to look at that and review that. Then merchandise plan, so you know what your target stock is and what you've got to play with within the store. A buying plan is really important. I think a lot of us look at the P&L, which only talks to you, like your KPI report only talks to you about what you've sold. It actually has no control over what you've been buying. So sometimes in the background you've got a little bit crazy and a little bit overstocked. And then doing regular reviews on it all the time, I think, is important.
All right, so if we start to speak about some of these items, I guess, with a little bit more reference and a sort of deep dive these aspects. When you say know your stock needs, I mean, how can one figure that out? Like, is it as simple as someone just knowing, or is there a process that you're experienced with regards to how that could be undertaken? And what would you suggest people would consider in this aspect when it comes to understanding your stock needs?
Well, there's a few things you can do. I think you've all heard me talk about the census report, which I love dearly, and understanding what that means into a practice, so you know what your demographic is. So I think understanding who the patients are that are coming in, but also looking at your reports, because once you look at your reports, you can see the information. You can pull out reports about what you've sold in the last year. You can get the highest sellers. You can see what your margin is. You can see lots of information from the reports you can get out of Optimate and Sunix in general. But demographics are really important. So have a think about the customers as well that are coming in the door.
And I guess just for the point of example, when you say demographics, can you speak to some examples of what demographics look like? So what are some parallels that you've seen, I guess, for the most part with regards to demographics, and then what that would represent for, say, stock reality, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Well, there's a store that we've worked on a little bit, and it's not Allie, who was going to talk to you later, it's another store. The practice actually had been working to a certain demographic. There was quite a lot of Italian people that lived in the area, and they had catered to that for a long time. And then when we started to look at their demographics, we found that the whole neighbourhood had changed so much that their average income had doubled. The people that were professionals in the area was double what the average is in Australia. And the actual customer that was living in the area was nothing to do with the people that they're actually trying to bring in. So it was very different to the products that they had and very different to what they were catering for. So it meant we could go and look at a change in products and what their needs were in the area.
Yeah, I recall that store, and I know exactly what we were talking about there. And I think, the feeling there was not a representation of what the current market is now compared to what it was, when the store first started, which was 20 years, I guess, prior to us intervening in that regard. So that makes sense. And understanding what your market looks like now, and perhaps if you've been in a practice or in a store that is 10, 15, 20 years old, checking in, because I guess demographics change. And so how often do you reckon checking in with that, I guess is relative? And is there a time frame? Is it once a year? Is it once every 10 years? Like, what are you thinking?
I think you should be looking at regularly. But if you're going to look at your KPIs and look at that information, you've got to use it. There's no use just looking at things and hoping that they change. You've got to make a plan for it. But I really feel for stock, once you work on it, when you're actually working towards making your stock better in a store, I have taken up to a year with people to clean their stock. Depends on how bad it is. So if they've got a lot of backup stock, I've seen stores that have got 2 years worth of backup stock. So once you work out the numbers, that's pretty scary. So it can take you up to a year to clean it up because there's a lot of steps involved in it. You actually need to work out, not just where they've been sitting, what stock they have, but you need to understand where you want to get to, what your target stock is, and then set plans about how do you reduce the age stock, how do you actually clean out the excess stock, and then how do you actually build the plan of the stock that you want to have in the future. So it takes a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing that you'd mentioned to me was price strategy. How important is that, and I guess how would a store best manage that with regards to understanding, what they're doing and how that pans out, I guess?
When I start to look at stock with people, we pull out reports that show the RRP that you set in your store, and it's quite common for me to see 20 to 40 price points in every 100 because you just set up a formula. Generally, that's what most practices do. You set up a formula that says, I'm going to go 2.5 times, I'm going to add this on. So you could have a frame that can come out at 219, 220, 223, 227, all these price points, it's all over the place. But if you set up a pricing strategy where you do just 2 or 3 points within every 100, you actually round everything up, but you set a table. I think when we talk to Allie from Northam later, she'll be able to tell you what we've done, but we actually set a whole table up for her that said when the frame comes in, if it's between this price and this price, that's what you sell it for. If it's between this price and this price, that's what you sell it for. So she decided on 3 price points in every 100, and then we set the pricing for that. So it makes it really easy for you to price product. But if you look around at all sorts of stores, it happens. If you go into a Target store or a Grace Brothers, DJs, those stores. I shouldn't say Grace Brothers, it's mine. Yeah. I'm old. But if you go into those stores and you shop, generally if you're looking at clothes, they don't have a million price points. They'll have like a $49 price point, $79 and $99. It actually makes it easier for customers to shop. You don't want all these price points that people are trying to look through when they're looking at their product. If you can make it really simple and you can average it out across different brands, it makes it really simple for them and for you in the store.
You mentioned margin, and I think you said 2.5 times. And I guess that's maybe just a standard that people may use. What else can you speak to margin, and how should a store approach that? Is it something that there's anything else to be taken into consideration, or is it just a matter of just figuring out a number or a ratio and just applying it accordingly?
Margin's a funny thing. If you're looking at percentages, if you actually look at your mix in your store, lower priced items will have a really high percentage margin but low dollar value. Really high priced items will have a low percentage margin but high value in the dollars. So the mix is important. So if you want to try and aim for around, I always say to people, try and get around 65 to 70% margin on average in your frames, probably 70% in lenses, but in frames, if you want to get around that 65%, you're probably doing higher valued products at around 50% margin, and the lower value products probably at about 90% margin. So you really do a mix across all the price points to actually get that average that you need, and that will be adjusted depending on your demographic as well. Because a lower demographic will have a higher percentage margin, but lower margin dollars. And then the other way around, if you've got a higher demographic, the percentage margin will be lower, but the dollar value will be a lot higher.
And how does that tie in with the merchandise plan and, I guess, target stock? Is that, I guess, there is a close assimilation there, and how would you speak for that? How does a store approach that with regards to understanding their margin, price strategy, and I guess understanding what their stock needs are?
So I think that the price strategy and the margin is all about the planning of what you want to achieve. So that's setting where you're going to put your price points and how much you want to make on your frames. When you start to look at your merch plan and your target stock is the number that you want to actually have in store at all times. So it allows you to have one piece for every hole or every piece on the pole or every shelf that you've got in the store, plus usually a month of backup stock. So if you sell 100 frames a month, for instance, you should be able to buy 100 frames a month to replace it. That means you have 100 frames in your drawers. That's the only backup you need. You don't need more than a month generally. The regional stores, I would say, stick to the month. City stores sometimes will go down to 14 days of backup stock. And what it allows you to do is to constantly buy new stock. If you actually have too much backup stock, you end up with a lot of aged stock, and then you can't go out and buy stuff because you've got dead stock everywhere. So target stock is really just working out what that number is. So it's my display spaces plus my 1 month of stock is how much I want to have at all times. The merch plan then is about assigning your brands to it. So you would do something like if you have poles that have 12 pieces on it, one unit in your store might be 6 pieces. And then you would work out within each of the brands you're going to carry how many units you want. So if they're a slow moving brand and you only need a small amount, you might only have 1 unit, which is 6 pieces. But if they're a high turnover or good stock turn product, you might want to have 2 poles, which would be 4 units. And once you set all that up, then you work out what brands that comes to, and then you can start to look at your age stock and your excess stock and work out what you're going to get rid of.
Maybe this is a bit of a simple question. When it comes to brands and I guess the relation of brands that you carry, how would you speak for that? I mean, with brand mix, is that something that you consider, or is it more about pricing and the merch plan and the target stock? I guess how much emphasis do you put on brands per se?
In most stores, when people come in, they don't ask for brands. They might ask for a couple of really well-known sunglass brands. They might ask for 1 or 2 well-known frame brands if they've seen something on a celebrity. Generally, we're the ones who are the ones that actually want the brands because we think that they're going to be easier to sell, and they often are. But I think what you need to do is actually look at, the demographic, look at your store and look at what you're trying to achieve, and then work out what your point of difference is, what lane you want to sit in, and then that's how you decide what frames you're going to have. If you want to be mainstream and having what everyone else has down the road, then go for the well-known brands. But if you want something to be a little bit different and you want to be a bit bespoke, then you might want to go and look for brands that are not so well-known, something that people can't get down the road. So you actually have quite a different stock range then for people. So I think it really is determined on the store you want to have, as well as the customers that you have, to make sure that you've got a good mix to suit.
So would you suggest that a store checks in with that before they start doing this exercise? Is that something that's a critical point of all of this?
It's part of the process, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess if you refer back to the episodes that we've spoken about, that was, know your difference, and it's all of that and how that ties in.
That's the main thing. I mean, tonight we actually, and because we're doing a podcast, I'll say, because nobody else saw it, we talked about mission and vision for one of the brands we were talking about. If you do that for your store and you have a mission and vision and you know where you want to go and that's your point of difference, every decision you make should tie back to that. Yeah. So every bit of stock that you're going to buy, every change you make in the store, it should, 2 things, it should talk to that, but it also should be about the customer as well, making things easier for the customer. We, especially in stock management, we do things that are easy for us. We tend to put stock up in brands. We tend to make it easy for when we're reordering and when we're stock taking, but customers don't actually shop that way. Yeah. Most people come in and want a look, they want a colour, they want a style. They don't necessarily want the brand. Yeah. So it's different for each store.
And it's funny, I've been privy to conversations with the store recently where they had changed the layout of their frames to not be brand and to be colour. And the amount of positive feedback they had with the store, with the frames now being colour sorted as opposed to brand sorted, was instantly recognised by customers. They'd picked up on it. So I guess if it's speaking to that makes, I guess...
And that's knowing your customer, because there's a lot of stats out there about brands as well. So there's certain brands that they want you to have a collection. So they actually want that to sit together and they want it to stand out, and they have rules around it. But in general, in a practice, if you want to do something like that, I think, look, it especially talks to women a lot because they're very visual in the way that they actually shop. So if something is actually set up by style or by colour, it's easier for them to find what they like because they window shop a lot as well.
Yeah. And it's probably fair to say that a lot of independent practices don't have that know your difference. I mean, a lot do, but a lot perhaps may not. It just may be something that's developed or happened naturally. So I think to check in with that is pretty key going forward. If we speak about buying plans with regards to all of this, how does a buying plan work, and can you explain what that looks like to the audience and I guess to the listeners?
Well, once you've decided on what your target stock quantity is, and then you build your merch plan of what you want, you then have to decide on what the buying plan is and what the rules are. So I think a lot of people will just pull out the list of what they've sold when the rep comes in and just replace it without thinking, is that the right quantity for me? So once you've actually got the plan together, and let's say you're allowed to have 12 of one brand and you might have 2 backups, when the rep comes in, if you haven't sold to go down in that number, you shouldn't buy. You should either rotate or you should have some training, but you shouldn't, buy just to replace it unless it's something that you need. So once you build the target plan, it's actually better for the suppliers because you're actually working with the suppliers. They understand what you're trying to do. It's easier to shop, and because you're going to buy more regularly, you might not wait for them to come in as well. So you might be buying in between. So your buying plan is about making sure that you have the stock that you need and that you only buy that, but you buy at the points you need to as well.
And like anything, I guess when we're measuring and monitoring, reviewing is an important component to all of this. And I guess how often should the reviews be done and what do they look like?
I think reviews are something, you should do regularly, but I think it's about understanding what you're trying to achieve. So when you're first starting to set this up, and because it can take some time, there's going to be excess stock that you want to get rid of. There's going to be aged stock that you want to get rid of. You really want to try and get to stock that's 12 to 18 months old. You don't really want it to be older than that. Once it gets older than that, it's harder for one of the suppliers to take it back as well. So it's really hard for you to be able to do anything with it. And we're really bad in stores that when we get new stock, we put it on the shelf and we put the old stock in the drawer. And so it gets older and it just sits down there. So it's, not going anywhere. So I think reviewing helps you to look at what you're merchandising on the wall. It actually helps you to look at your numbers and then to see if what you've got is actually what you need as well. And you can do that by looking, if you build a matrix that shows you how many brands you've got in a price point, and then you start to see where you're selling it from, it helps you to build out where you need to add brands or take away brands as well.
To sort of wrap this part of the podcast up, when it comes to timing, you said it does take a long time. In your experience, how long is that time from identifying that this is something that you need to address if you haven't already, and I guess seeing it through to a successful completion, or I guess an evolution, because it's not something that's ever complete, it's obviously ongoing. How long do you normally see that taking?
It depends on how much work and how much stock you've got. We're going to get Allie from Northam to talk to us in a minute. With Allie, we started working on her stock in March and we did a whole review of everything. And then we started looking at the numbers again in June because it took 3 months to do the work that Allie did. And that work was when you actually decide on your price strategy, you have to reprice every frame in your store. When you're actually looking at what you're going to do with your age stock, sometimes with the age stock, one of the things that you'll do is actually reprice frames rather than mark them down. If you mark a frame down, people think it's old and they don't want to buy it. But if you reprice it into a different price point, it might actually sell on a different price point. So Allie did all of that work and it took her months to go through and do it all. And then, I'll quickly tell them the stats, Allie, because we looked at this today, and then Allie will come and tell you how she found the whole experience. But we looked at Allie's numbers from 2021 right through. So we looked at 3 full years. We looked at year to date in 2024 at the numbers, and then we've measured them again in June and July this year. So in comparison, her frame ASP had not changed by much. It was like around a $4 difference across the 4 years we looked at it. Then in June, it jumped up by $50. And then in July, it jumped up by another $10. So we've got about a $60 ASP increase for Allie in her frames. And that was because we actually looked at what she needed to do and we set a pricing strategy. Because once you set the pricing strategy, instead of having all those price points, all the ones that are sitting here move up to here, and all the ones that are sitting, maybe around the 260 mark will move to 269. The ones that are sitting at 270 might go to 299. So you automatically have a lift there, but then you're also looking at the margin to make sure that the margin's right, so you have a lift because of the margin as well. So when we did that with all of her stock, that's the result that we got. So overall, the lens ASP hasn't changed much because that's the next step we're working on, but the job value has gone up quite a bit because it's a combination of maintaining the lenses but also growing the frame ASP.
Well, I guess it's about time to introduce Allie into it all. So, Allie, come on down. First and foremost, thank you for being so transparent in this. I know it's something that perhaps not everyone will want to speak about on such a public forum, but we definitely appreciate it for the purposes of this and making an example of what this actually looks like. Joe, did you want to ask some questions?
I'll make it really easy, Allie.
Thank you.
Just to tell us how you found the experience. Was it something that you had thought about? Did you have any idea of what the process would be like? How have you found it all?
I found the process quite easy because you just did step by step. It was just, let's do this section at a time. I didn't really know where to start. After 10 years in business, I thought I knew what I knew and I needed some more help by someone like you.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, I don't want to, put you in the spotlight too much, but one of the things that's interesting, when you start to look at numbers, you start to get a feel for who the person is and what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And so what was interesting with Allie was that I think that in general, everything is great, but then there was certain price points and areas that was a little bit of a struggle. So the pricing on those seemed to be more of what we had to actually work on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's confidence in what you're selling and what you're selling it for. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And how hard was it changing all the labels?
It was hard. It was hard. I think I was getting to work at 6 o'clock in the morning before we started testing for the day, but it was worth it. The figures show it.
Yeah, they do. And do you think that this is something that you can then continue to do moving forward? It makes it easy for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, she's so happy because she wanted to get these new tags put on these frames. And I said, no, we're not doing it. And then you came along and said, you're repricing everything. So she won and I won.
Yeah. For the story, yeah. Is there anything else that you think that people should know when they're trying to do this?
I think the biggest thing was there's some price points that you said we were going to decrease. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, how are you going to make more money by decreasing your stock? It was only a minority. I think you just need to trust in the process. You definitely know what you're doing and you've hooked me in, hook, line and sinker.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cool.
That's nice. Thanks,
you.
Allie.
Appreciate it. Yeah, cool. All right. What are some of the main things, I guess, Joe, what are some of the key questions that you get asked with regards to this and maybe anything else? But I guess if we focus on stock management, when you go in to stores like Allie and to other stores that you've interacted with over the last couple of years that you've been doing this, what are some of the main areas that people, I guess, have hesitation with, have questions with, or ask you in this regard?
I think introducing new brands is one that I get asked about, because if you're going to work to like a plan and have rules around what you're doing and you set up what your target stock is and what brands you want to carry, and then a new brand comes along, it's like, how do I actually introduce that? Because it adds to the quantity. So there's a plan for that as well. So whenever you want to introduce a plan, it's like a little bit like my wardrobe at home. I get told when I buy new things, I've got to get rid of things. It's the same thing. So you've got to pick out what brand that you think is the right brand to get rid of. So having a good matrix to understand what sits and what price point is really good, and then understanding, where the new brand is going to sit, whether it's the style or the price point, you then have to work out what's going out. That's where the review comes in, because if you actually start to look at the frames you've got, you'll start to see that some of them have a better stock turn than others, a really good sell-through, or you might have duplications in price points, so it's worthwhile getting rid of something to bring in a different price point.
And I guess as we wrap up this particular topic, because there is one other question that I do have, but is there anything else, I guess, take homes, anything that people should be considering in regards to this over and above what we've already discussed?
No, I think it's just that if you want to do it, allow some time, because it does take time. And I think that you've got to bring your team along for the journey, because you will get asked questions, and actually be comfortable, as Allie said, that sometimes some prices will go down. But in the end, it simplifies things. I think that, and we talked a little bit about this with Allie today, what ends up happening when you're buying stock is your personal opinion and emotions come into it, and then you sit and look at stock and you go, well, I'm not sure if we can sell it for that price, and you really start to, to price a different way. When you have a formula, it's actually in black and white there, and you're just following it. It makes it so much easier because it takes the emotion out, and it just makes it a process. So setting it up and following it, is what you need to do.
All right, cool. Well, the other question that I had is a question that has been asked, I think it was via Instagram, from Specs Design. And it was a question regarding staffing. So it's a little bit of a pivot from the topic that we've discussed today, but definitely I think one that we should answer. And the question was, I don't have it in front of me, but it was along the lines of, if we're looking at taking on new staff members, is it better to get somebody that's optically experienced, or is it better to get somebody that's green with the right attitude and get them on board and teach them, I guess, the ways of the practice? What insights and what thoughts do you have on that?
This might break the room. I'm actually a dispenser, and I've been dispensing for a very long time. A long time. And look, generally out there, most people will say, let's get the dispenser and bring a dispenser in, right? I probably will say to you that I've had just as much success with people that are not dispensers who've never actually worked in the industry. It's more about getting the person you need to fit in your team. I think that's really important. So you need to understand, the personalities and the people in the team and what skills you need and where the personality sits. But I used to go out and go to places like, fashion stores, jewelers, pharmacists, because they actually have to have a lot of technical information. And if somebody was really good at what they did, I'd try and poach them. There's no harm in doing that. I know that's bad. Lots of people are listening to this. Yeah. Because, the way that we work today, we are a retail business and 85% of our income comes from the front of store. 15% generally comes from the consultation room, right? That's in a general practice. If you're behavioural, it'll probably go up to like 35% consultation, 65% in the store. So it's about fashion and sales. And because we're trying to create a point of difference and most people are trying to create a store that is about, fashion and styling and about creating an experience for people, you want people who can do that. And sometimes the dispenser that might have been around for a while that's quite technical might not be the right person for that. It might actually be somebody who's coming in who's got really good fashion sense, who's actually really good at selling, really good at speaking to people, and they're smart enough that you can actually teach them dispensing. They're going to be your answer, because selling is a hard thing for us. And whenever I'm out and I'm talking to optoms, especially in the room, and I'm talking to practices, they hate the fact that they're talking about sales. The mindset is to change over to actually you're providing a solution. Yeah. So it's about providing a solution. It's not actually about selling. But it is about talking to people about products. It is about knowing about, face shapes and stuff. But they want to hear about the designers. They want to hear about the brands. They want to hear about the materials. They want to know about things that are more fashion and up-to-date stuff. So I'd say the main thing is working out what is it that you want and what are you trying to achieve. Can you do that by getting somebody who's really good with the sales and training them up? Or is it that you really need somebody that's really technical, and then I would go for a dispenser? So I think you really got to look at what you really want.
Yeah, and to add to that, I agree in that sentiment. I feel like, when it comes to the sales part, that is the hardest part. Sales is a dirty word. We are in a pretty unique industry where we're an allied healthcare service, so we obviously have that medical component to our store, but as you mentioned, 85% of our revenue is generated from sales. It's not like a physio or a chiro or, or those types of services where they're basically just providing their service and that's what their pay comes from. And I feel like, there is a podcast episode coming out, whether it's before or after this, where we look at solutions-based selling. And I think you've got to switch the narrative from selling a product to providing a benefit. And I think once you can do that, make that connection, it's not necessarily a concept that's unfamiliar or it's something that we resonate with, I guess.
Well, the stats show, we were, when we were doing some training today, there's a lot of stats out there that say that people will pay more if they get good service. They'll pay more. Knowledge is really important. They want really good knowledge. But they also want you to be the expert. Yeah. They want you to be the authoritative and have the answers for them. They don't want you to say, I recommend this. They want you to say, I prescribe this. They want you to say, you need this. Not talking about you can have this, this or this. It's saying, today the best lens for you is this because of this reason. You told me that this is the issue you have. I've looked at your prescription. I've asked you some questions. The best thing for you today is this. Then they might need to change it because of their budget or something like that. But you're always talking about what is the best solution for them. Then it becomes about solutions, not about selling.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that is one thing you want to identify with, especially when it comes to recruitment and staffing, is your culture. And I think that what's more important than getting somebody that perhaps has the skill sets that you need, you want to find the person that's going to culturally fit into your store. Because the worst thing that you can get for your business is somebody that doesn't fit into your culture. And that can basically explode everything else. And then
it's like a cancer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then it doesn't just affect that particular, it's that person, but it's then what do the other team members feel and think. And so I think you've also got to understand and recognize who your staff members are and what their traits are like. And that goes back to know your why, because that will represent a lot of what your story is about. And so when you recognize what those are, and some simple things that you can do is like identify 5 points for what's important to you. It could be integrity, it could be trust, it could be passion. There are things that, and once you know what that is, you can then articulate that to your next staff member. And if they resonate with that, then that's a good thing, because, attitude is the main thing that you're generally looking for. And that's where it speaks more to, say, the skill, because you can teach the right person anything if they've got that mindset and they fit into your culture. I think that's a really critical part. And if you get a dispenser that's got 15 years of experience, that's great. It may be the right person for you, but it's not what I'd put as the number one thing that would be required. You'd rather have someone that's green that you can basically teach and guide. And that's, there are some tools that we can help in that regard as well. So,
yeah. And I don't want to stereotype, but in general, people who are good salespeople who talk fashion are a bit messier, and they need people to help clean them up. And the people that are a little bit more technical will tend to stay behind the counter and do all the really good stuff and keep it nice and clean, but they might find it harder to talk to people. So that's why it's good to have a mix, because you want to have a good mix of people that are really happy to run out and talk to everyone and give them everything. And then there's other people that stand back a little bit that people need to come to. So that's where the mix is really good to think about.
Cool.
Last minute question, we're good.
So we were a greenfields practice and we opened up. I just wondered how you would change your stock plan for someone who's a greenfields practice.
Well, stock plans are interesting. I mean, if you have a practice that's been going for a long time, you can review everything. For me, greenfield is about knowing what you want when you first walk in. It's the perfect opportunity to say, this is where I want to sit. This is where my line of business is. I mean, I want to be either designer, I want to be, low end, mid, whatever it is. Then you actually build your stock around that. So if you actually go in there knowing the practice you want to be, it's actually a good time because you're really clean. You get the opportunity to go in and actually work on it. So I'd build a merch plan. I'd look at, are you doing, shelves? Are you doing poles? How many, pieces do I have? And then what brands I want to have based on what I want to achieve. So if I've gone in there and looked at, if you're a contact lens practice, or if you're a pediatric practice, or if you're, more about fashion, it's then making sure that the products that you get match in with that. And I would consider, it's a dirty word sometimes, consider not actually having a full store. If you've got shelves, you can actually have less stock and build your way up so that you're a little bit smart. I'd also work with your suppliers because they know the best sellers. They're actually really the ones that actually know your stock and their brands more than you will. So I would talk to them and they will often give you really good advice on which frames you should start with because they know they sell really well. Help them buy for you is what I would say. Does that help you? But it's hard because you don't have numbers. Okay, yeah. Well, you don't have numbers, so you're actually flying blind. So I think it's mainly knowing who you are, what you want to achieve, and make sure that the product matches it. But I would look at your demographics as well. So the census report is a beautiful report. It tells you everything about the people in your area. That gives you a really good understanding of, the people who are going to walk in the door. They're the things you can start with. It's hard with the greenfield. It's really hard because you're building it up from nothing. But if you know what you want to be to start with, that's how you start the plan.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for your time, guys. Thanks, Joe, for all your insights today. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Focused View, proudly presented by Optical. It's been our privilege to share the insights and stories that resonate deeply with the eye care community. We hope today's episode has not only inspired you, but also armed you with the practical strategies and innovative ideas to help you enhance your practice and professional journey. If you found value in our conversation, we'd be grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. And share this episode with your colleagues. It helps us reach more eye care professionals like you and grow our community of visionaries. Stay connected by subscribing to The Focused View and visiting our website www.thefocusedview.com.au for additional resources and episode summaries. We look forward to your company again in our next episode. Until then, keep focused. I'm Michael Nasser. Bye for now.